Most importantly, back to work. It's neither Democrat or Republican. It's fundamentally American. Thank you, Madam.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentlelady from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will not take 5 minutes. I actually wanted to come down here in support of this bill of the Energy and Water Development Appropriations Bill. I'd like to commend Chairman Frelinghuysen and the entire subcommittee on developing a strong bill that balances the needs of our nation with fiscal responsibility. This bill cuts spending by nearly $3 billion in FY13 enacted levels while maintaining critical funding for navigation, infrastructure, and our nation's domestic energy needs. One issue of particular importance to me and my home in Southwest Washington is the maintenance of our waterways and small ports. Sediment buildup has essentially blocked commerce, leaving communities in Wahkiakum County, Chinook, and Ilwaco without their largest and most critical industries. One of these channels is blocked. When one of these channels is blocked for communities in my district, it's no different than if a town's main highway were completely blocked or washed away. We need to treat the maintenance of our nation's small ports with the same level of urgency. The underlying bill makes great strides to alleviate these challenges by including $1 billion from the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund for Army Corps dredging and no less than $30 million specifically for small ports and waterways. While this will not completely fulfill all of our nation's needs, it certainly illustrates the Chairman's dedication and our dedication to our ports in towns and counties and states across the country, like my home in Southwest Washington. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I am proud to have played a role in securing this funding. I strongly support the bill and encourage all of my colleagues to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's been an honor to be in this chamber and listen to the debate that's going on. And my colleagues on the other side, their bill seeks to reduce the role that the Environmental Protection Agency would play. And I hear words and phrases like an unelected body that makes decisions in the night for no one to see or hear. But, Mr. Chairman, it is not an unelected body. We have elections in our country, and we had a presidential election. And elections have consequences. And the EPA is an arm of the administration, an arm of a president who was elected with a commanding victory this past November. And to hear that this is an unelected body and work being done in the dead of night for no one else to know about is just not the case. And I urge my colleagues on the other side, I was a prosecutor, and we would have a trial. I would pick a jury. We would put on evidence. I would give a closing argument. The jury would deliberate. And then we would all accept the verdict. We had the same thing for over a year. We had presidential debates after debates, TV ads that we were all tired of. And now we have a president who was reelected and an agency that the president is charged with administrating. And it really does disturb me, Mr. Chairman, to think that these agencies shouldn't have any teeth or enforcement to protect our children in the future. But I also rise today to express my concerns about the impact that this Energy and Water Appropriations Bill will have on the important work that our national laboratories are doing. We depend on our national laboratories for basic scientific research that keeps our country safe and keeps us on the cutting edge of technology. Our national labs are home to some of the greatest minds in the country, and we all benefit greatly when we allow these great researchers the freedom to do what they were trained to do and to explore the scientific questions that they are passionate about. I'm fortunate that I'm able to represent Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and Sandia National Laboratory, which are NNSA laboratories, and work on maintaining our nuclear stockpile, but also participating in research that will provide an all-of-the-above energy solution for our future. Right now, however, this bill reduces what the laboratories call laboratory-directed research and development. And laboratory-directed research and development, LDRD, allows the scientists at the laboratory to work on their own experiments in addition to the work that they do at the lab. Now, in the private sector, Google really was the first company to innovate with this. They call it 20% time. One day out of the week, an employee at Google would be able to work 20% of the week, one day on their own projects for Google. And some of the programs that we all use, like Gmail or Picasa or Google documents came from Google's 20% time. Well, the laboratory, their 20% time is actually today 8% time, and it's LDRD, and this is a way to recruit top talent and retain a scientist with the promise of being able to do publishable work in addition to their classified work. But this bill foolishly cuts LDRD time from 8% to 4.5%. This will result in less independent science research. It will hurt the ability of our classified labs to recruit and retain top talent, and will surely deprive the nation of scientific discoveries. Additionally, I'm concerned about the cuts to the Lawrence Livermore National Ignition Facility, also known as NIF. Over the long term, NIF is a fundamental part of providing our nation with energy security. It also, in light of international treaties that prevent us from conducting nuclear tests below or above ground, it allows us to use laser science to test and maintain our stockpile while also participate in non-proliferation programs, which makes our stockpile leaner and meaner. America should be a leader in the area of fusion research. Russia, China, and France have accelerated investments in their efforts to compete in inertial confinement fusion, but they remain behind this premier U.S. endeavor. Seizing support for NIF would be ceding to those countries or others American leadership in what would be energy industry of the future. Considering our national security threats and limited domestic energy sources, this is no time to be cutting its capabilities. Unfortunately, jobs at NIF have already been cut and the capacity has been curtailed because of reductions in fiscal year 2013 and the sequester. The funding levels in this bill would make the situation much worse. We must ensure that the United States does not fall behind our competitors and continues to build upon the investments already begun. It is crucial that NIF gets the funding it needs to continue this crucial work. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues to carefully consider the damage that these cuts would do at our national laboratories and consider the value of preserving our country's leadership and our role in maintaining our nuclear stockpile and investments in the future of our country through laboratory-directed research and development. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. Clerk will read.
Page 14, line 1, Title II, Department of the Interior, Central Utah Project. Central Utah Project completion account, $7,425,000. For fiscal year 2014, the Commission may use an amount not to exceed $1,500,000 for administrative expenses. Bureau of Reclamation. Appropriations shall be expended to execute authorized functions of the Bureau of Reclamation. Water and related resources, $812,744,000.
Clerk will suspend. What purpose does the gentlelady from South Dakota seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
Report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mrs. Nome of South Dakota. Page 15, line 4, after the dollar amount, insert increase by $25 million. Page 22, line 5, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $15 million. Page 28, line 10, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $15 million.
The gentlelady from South Dakota is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my amendment would ensure that we're placing a higher priority on completing some ongoing rural water projects in the Great Plains region and in the West. My amendment takes $15 million from the Department of Energy's administration budget and $15 million from the solar energy programs. $25 million of this would go into the Bureau of Reclamation's rural water projects. The remaining $5 million would go and be left for deficit reduction. Mr. Chair, I recognize that we have limited funds to go around, and this is why we need to work so hard to make sure that our priorities are addressed. It's why we make sure that we can agree that water should be a priority, that drinking water for people that live in this country should be a priority. There are places in this country, especially in the rural areas, that people are still waiting for a stable water supply. There are towns that would like to grow, but they don't have enough water or basic infrastructure to find new businesses and bring new families in. They're waiting for the federal government to complete projects that have already been authorized, that have already been started, and that those communities have already invested in. As we go through the appropriations process, I think supplying our rural areas with water should be a top priority. I think it's shocking. It's shocking that some of these authorized projects have been waiting years to see the promised federal dollars to complete the projects. Many of these local communities have already funded their share of the projects. Some of the administration's funding proposals for these projects don't even keep up with inflation. So as representatives, we absolutely need to be responsible with taxpayer dollars. When the federal government makes a promise to provide basic infrastructure, they need to follow through. This amendment is just a small step in getting where we need to be. It's common sense to make sure that something as basic as water supply is available in all areas, urban and rural. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on the amendment to ensure that these very essential projects are on their way to completion. I'd like to thank the chairman and the committee for their hard work on this bill. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak on this amendment, and I would urge all of my colleagues to support this amendment. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would yield back.
The gentlelady yields back her time. Does the gentlelady from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, I would like to claim time in opposition to Representative Noem's amendment. I think that there's a worthy objective of providing fresh water to all parts of our country. We've talked about that earlier today. The problem is her amendment takes funds from other accounts to try to move some of those dollars to rural America. And frankly, our fundamental problem is that this bill is $2.8 billion under what was being expended in this fiscal year of 2013, and it's $4 billion under the administration request. So what she's essentially doing is taking money from something else in order to move it to rural areas of the country. I represent some of those. They're very worthy. Some of them do receive funds through the Department of Agriculture. Some smaller communities also have associations with the Environmental Protection Agency. But to cut funds, to take money from the renewable energy accounts, $15 million from there, and from other water-related accounts, and to cut departmental administration really is not sort of picking off very scarce bones. And I have to oppose the amendment on that basis. The renewable energy accounts, which are America's future, they're a major part of our down payment on the future, have been cut 60%. You are withdrawing additional funds from those accounts to try to move toward needed rural water needs. But frankly, these accounts have been severely cut, and the gentlelady's amendment harms them more. We simply can't cut more from those accounts. I support more funding for the rebuilding of America's urban water systems, which are leaking all over this country. In fact, we just had a collapse in my home community. For some reason, a major intersection just imploded because the water systems underneath weren't properly attended to. This is happening from coast to coast. So our urban water systems are severely constricted. There's all kinds of problems there. And in parts of rural America, obviously we are still trying to extend lines, trying to clean water, trying not to pollute water anymore in order to make sure that citizens who live there and the livestock that is there has sufficient freshwater resources. So I identify with what you're trying to do, but not where you are taking the funds from. Those dollars simply can't be cut any further. So I have to oppose the amendment, and I urge my colleagues to join me in opposition to the gentlelady's amendment. Perhaps we can work in other ways in the future, but the fundamental problem is the bill's been cut $2.8 billion, and some of that is coming from the dollars that would be available for rural water programs. So I strongly oppose the amendment, not because it isn't worthy, but simply because she's raiding other accounts that are cut literally to the bone. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my remaining time and urge my colleagues to vote no on the Noem amendment.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Purpose does the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleague and neighbor from South Dakota for authoring and offering this bill, this amendment, which I support and urge my colleagues to support. It really reprioritizes the spending in the good work that the Appropriations Committee has already done, just a few $1 million. It reprioritizes it in a way that recognizes the changing of our nation in recent years. Because so much of the policy and the appropriations of our Energy Department are based on an old order that recognizes our country as having a scarcity of natural resources for energy development. But that, Mr. Chairman, is no longer the case. We are now a nation of abundant energy resources. But we are still, especially in the West, a nation of scarce water resources that are important to the development of many of our rural communities and our tribes and our farms and ranches. Water for drinking, water for industrial growth, water for irrigation. And so I think this reprioritization of a few $1 million is appropriate and recognizes how different our world is. And with that, I urge a yes vote on the amendment and yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from South Dakota. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Clerk will read.
Page 16, line 3, Central Valley Project Restoration Fund, $53,288,000. California Bay Delta Restoration, $30 million. Policy and Administration, $60 million. Administrative Provision. Appropriations for the Bureau of Reclamation shall be available for purchase of 5 passenger motor vehicles. General Provisions, Department of the Interior, Section 201. None of the funds shall be available through a reprogramming of funds that creates or initiates a new program, project, or activity. Section 202. None of the funds may be used to determine the final point of discharge for the inceptor drain for the San Luis unit until development to minimize any detrimental effect of the San Luis drainage waters. Section 203. Until the pipeline reliability study required in the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2012 is completed, the Bureau of Reclamation shall not deny approval if the corrosion control meets the requirements of a published national standard promulgated by the American Water Works Association. Title III, Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Renewable Energy, Energy Reliability and Efficiency, $982,637,000.
Gentleman from Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Hastings of Washington, page 22, line 5, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $9,518,000. Page 28, line 10, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $20 million. Page 31, line 16, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $22,586,000.
Gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, nuclear weapons production played a pivotal role in our nation's defense for decades, helping to end the Second World War and to end the Cold War. But implementing these programs resulted in a large volume of radioactive waste that the federal government has a legal responsibility to clean up. Today, there are indications that nuclear waste is leaking out of the underground tanks at Hanford in my congressional district, with higher levels of contamination now being detected in the surrounding soil. The amendment that I offer, Mr. Chairman, would restore a portion of the reduction for the Environmental Management Program that would so greatly impact the Richland Operations Office and help enable the cleanup to move forward safely, efficiently, and in a timely manner.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield to the subcommittee chairman.
I appreciate your long-standing commitment to Hanford, and I support this amendment, which is aimed at strengthening environmental management and the Richlands Operations Office. EM is a priority for the subcommittee. I look forward to returning to Hanford, as I have in the past, to get a first-hand look at the latest challenges in progress, and we know there are lots of challenges. As you know, Representative Hastings, the Department of Energy has not yet provided confirmation of probable tank leaks, a record of decision on the potential for tank true waste, or a plan for the waste treatment plant. This information will be required as Congress completes the appropriations process for the Office of River Protection.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your support for this amendment and for your position on Yucca Mountain in the underlying bill, which is the ultimate solution for Hanford's high-level tank waste. To remind the chairman, I am meeting with Secretary Moniz later this week, and I will reiterate the need for the information that you just outlined for WTP. And I also recognize the discrepancy in the allocations between the House and the Senate bills. I want to ask the gentleman, how do you anticipate that these differences will be resolved, particularly as they pertain to EM, in the event of a continuing resolution? And I yield to the chairman.
Would the gentleman yield? In the event of a continuing resolution, the Department of Energy has the flexibility in determining funding levels for individual programs and projects, including EM. Mr. Hastings, I'm pleased to support your amendment, and I wish you success.
Thank you very much, reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman, and I hope we don't get to a CR, but thank you very much for that information. At this time, I'd like to yield to my colleague from Southwest Washington, the gentlelady from the Appropriations Committee, Mrs. Herrera-Butler.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized.
Hanford, as the gentleman mentioned, was the reactor used for the Manhattan Project and was used to build the U.S. nuclear arsenal during the Cold War. I recently had an opportunity to tour Hanford with the gentleman and so firmly believe in this amendment because this is a federal government responsibility. This wasn't a choice by a local community, and the cleanup just is simply beyond the scope of the communities involved. This matters to people in my district and up and down the Columbia River, which is adjacent to your area. And I would urge my colleagues, this is not this isn't somebody's pet project, this isn't somebody's good idea. This is a responsibility. The gentleman said a legal responsibility. I would add to that a moral responsibility of the federal government to put this money here and help aid the cleanup at Hanford. So with that, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentlelady for her remarks, and again, I urge adoption of this amendment because this is a legal obligation. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Back, gentlelady from Ohio.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman and say to Congressman Hastings that I rise with sympathy toward the situation you face at Hanford, but must oppose your amendment. And the amendment essentially would cut funding from the energy efficiency and renewable energy, specifically the weatherization program, which affects dozens and dozens of communities across this country, many of them very low income, as well as departmental administration, which has already been cut to the bone to move money to Hanford. And it is true that the communities that contributed to the Manhattan Project cannot be left with the remnants of that war effort, and we have a moral obligation to clean up these sites, and without question, the bill is inadequate to meet the commitments to states and local communities faced with cleanup. However, we cannot take those dollars out of the hides of elderly people who might live in Newark, New Jersey in the wintertime, or in Portland, Oregon, or places where they can't afford their energy bills, or we can't divert money from administration, which is already cut to such a low level at the department in order to move dollars to Hanford. Hanford already receives over $2 billion a year. $2 billion. I wish my community received $2 billion. I wish your communities received $2 billion a year. Those dollars come from the River Protection Program, over $1.2 billion, plus an additional $877 million, well over $2 billion a year. That's more than most communities represented by members here can even imagine coming to their region of the country. The defense waste cleanup in Ohio is extraordinary. We don't get $2 billion a year. So to say to senior citizens across this country, we're going to take it out of your weatherization program so you can't put plastic around your windows in the wintertime and try to retrofit your houses, or we're going to take it out of departmental administration where we risk accounting for the funds properly for all of these programs that the department has to administer, including the cleanup, some of these contracts that we've had problems with in that department, I simply can't support the manner in which the gentleman and the gentlelady have identified where they're taking the money from. So while I agree with their intent, as I've said many times, the allocation for this bill is $2.8 billion under last year and $4 billion under the administration's request, and it is simply insufficient. We can't keep picking the bones off the most needy parts of our country to try to divert additional dollars to efforts at Hanford that are spending well over $2 billion a year already. So I would ask my colleagues to oppose the amendment. I reluctantly oppose the gentleman's amendment, but in being fair and looking at all the accounts, we simply can't keep picking from the bones of other programs at the department. And I yield back my remaining time and ask my colleagues to vote against the Hastings amendment.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Washington. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentlelady from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
The amendment is agreed to. And what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Ms. Eddie Bernice Johnson of Texas.
To suspense with the reading of the amendment.
Is there objection? Gentlelady is recognized.
I object.
Without objection.
Would the gentleman be able to identify the amendment which she's proposing?
Clerk will read.
Page 22, line 5, after the dollar amount, insert increase by $992,620,000.
I withdraw my objection.
Objection is withdrawn.
Thank you,
Without objection, this readings are dispensed with. The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm offering this amendment to restore the significant cuts to the critical science and energy research and development programs that were made in this bill, including an 80% cut to ARPA-E and 50% cut to the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. These programs, along with the Department of Energy's Office of Science, are vital to our national security, our economy, and our environment in the decades to come. It is really worth us thinking about the fact that we have seen how government research can pay off when it comes to energy development. DOE-supported research was key to the development of high-efficiency gas turbines for coal plants, nuclear reactors developed at federal labs, and the directional drilling and hydraulic fracturing practices that have led to the shale gas boom today. But we should remember that those achievements required decades of federal investment, and the overwhelming majority of which was focused on fossil and nuclear energy. I continue to support research to make today's technologies cleaner and more efficient, but I believe that it is time for a level playing field. And I introduce a real competition to our markets. And that is where the priorities set by Congress come into play. We have to find the greatest value for our investment of our taxpayers' dollar, and today it is the emerging energy technology sectors that can cost benefit from government support. I have heard it said that this bill has been cut to the bone, and I think it is also and I know that. It's important that DOE's Office of Science is actually the largest supporter of basic research and the physical scientists in the country, and it operates more than 30 national scientific user facilities where applications go well beyond energy innovation. Our nation's top researchers from industry, academia, and other federal agencies use these facilities to examine everything from new materials that will better meet our military needs, to new pharmaceuticals that will better treat disease, to even examining the fundamental building blocks of the universe. I believe that this is the stewardship of unique scientific research, including the nation's major national user facilities, is another important role that I hope the Department will continue to make use of its highest priorities. It is no secret that Congress's inability to date to come to an agreement on a sensible budget plan has led to some devastating cuts to many of these important programs with serious impacts on our nation's future. To restore these research funds, I certainly would not wish to make these proposed cuts in my amendment, which may slow down our ability to meet the nation's defense. However, the environmental cleanup obligations this year, I believe that these research programs are the seed corn of our future. Some things we know we have to wait to do, and perhaps we can prolong that cleanup. But, Mr. Chairman, I sincerely plead that we not cut this type of money from the research we have going. Research is our nation's future. We cannot give up on our nation's future. So I'm hoping that we can support this amendment and allow some of this research to go forth. Thank you, and I yield back and ask for support.
Yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the amendment and seek time.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the amendment. This amendment increases funding for science, ARPA-E, and renewable energy reliability, and efficiency by a total of $1.7 billion, using defense environmental cleanup as an offset. Defense environmental cleanup provides funding to clean up the legacy of the Manhattan Project, as we've discussed earlier. A huge task that will take years to do, and major expense and significant resources. And we heard part of the Washington State story, but there's part of it in other parts of the country as well. The federal government has an inherent responsibility to address this legacy and to ensure that the materials created to build our nuclear weapons stockpile do not endanger public health and the environment. There are also some other daunting technical challenges to clean up this waste, and this amendment would frankly completely gut those types of programs. It is doubtful that this level would even sustain the basic operation and maintenance of the facilities, let alone allow for any progress in the cleanup effort. The cleanup effort needs to be sustained. Our allocation is made, as I said earlier in the afternoon, for very tough choices. We place the highest priority on activities which the federal government must take the lead. While the applied energy and advanced research programs are down substantially, admittedly, there is a strong interest in advancing these areas of research, and the responsibility for conducting that research can shift in many ways to the private sector. Therefore, I strongly oppose the amendment and urge other members to do the same and yield back. Be happy to yield.
Thank you for your explanation. I don't disagree with you, but I do feel that we cannot cut our research and think that we'll have a prosperous future. So I would ask you to help me find a spot that perhaps we can use the dollars and postpone some of the cleanup. This is urgent, and it is needed. And I would ask of you to agree to assist in us restoring some of this research
if
money.
the gentlewoman will yield, we know that the gentlewoman's heart is in the right place. Your heartfelt views. We'll be happy to work with you to see what we can do to assist in these other areas. But this environmental cleanup, in some respects, is a court-ordered, but besides obviously the potential for human health that's been adversely affected. So appreciate the gentleman for yielding. Yield back to you.
Yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. From Washington.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I, too, rise in strong opposition to this amendment, and I do appreciate the gentlelady's concerns, particularly about science funding. However, Mr. Chairman, increasing funding for optional programs, as valuable as they may be, cannot come at the expense of the federal government meeting its legal obligations to clean up the waste created by our nation's nuclear defense programs. And I might add, Mr. Chairman, these are programs that won World War II and largely won the Cold War. At Hanford, in my district, the federal government has 56 million gallons of radioactive waste stored in 177 underground tanks. Today it appears likely that some of these tanks are leaking, and higher levels of contamination have now been detected in the area surrounding one of the most recent leakers. In addition, there is also a large quantity of radioactive waste at Hanford that was never put into tanks. That too must be dealt with, as well as nuclear waste at other sites across the country like Savannah River, Oak Ridge, and Idaho. Again, nuclear waste was created by programs of the federal government for defense purposes. Cutting $1.7 million from the EM program would essentially halt most nuclear waste cleanup work, and it would put safety of our cleanup sites at risk and any chance of the federal government meeting its existing legal cleanup commitments to the states. Mr. Chairman, let me be more specific about Hanford. I mentioned 56 million gallons of nuclear/hazardous waste stored in 177 underground tanks. Those tanks range in size from 500,000 gallons to 1 million gallons. Now, when you go out to the site, of course, you can't see the tanks because they're underground. All you see is gauges on top that monitor what activity is going on in those tanks. So if you want to quantify how much 56 million gallons is, picture this. If you want to put 56 million gallons here, it would take over 21 House chambers. Over 21 House chambers to fill 56 million gallons of waste. That's how much radioactive waste is at Hanford that needs to be cleaned up. It's the result of the Defense Weapons Program. Now, distinguished subcommittee chairman and I and others have mentioned the legal obligation. In Washington State, that legal obligation is called the Tri-Party Agreement. It has set deadlines for cleaning up Hanford, including the waste that I just mentioned. But it's a legal agreement between the federal EPA, between the federal Department of Energy, and between the State Department of Ecology. It's a legal agreement with timelines. And if you don't meet the agreements, of course, you're going to be sued. And every time there has been a threat to be sued or a disagreement on the timelines, the state has always won. So why would we want to defund this program and put all of that at risk, which of course would cost a whole lot more money in the future? So while I recognize the gentlelady and her passion for science funding, and I too understand that, I have a national lab in my district, for example, 56 million gallons, or over 21 House chambers, of radiohazardous waste needs to be cleaned up, and it's the responsibility of the federal government. So I oppose the gentlelady's amendment. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
When he yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Last word.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of my colleague, the gentlewoman from Texas's amendment. It is vital we support our basic scientific research. As the ranking member of the Science Committee, she carries great weight in these matters, and I would like to yield time to her.
Gentlelady from Texas.
Thank you very much. I clearly understand.
The gentleman from California will remain standing.
I clearly understand the explanation. This amendment does not strike all of the funds. It strikes about a third. And I know the dangers of having all the waste that needs to be cleaned up. But I also think that it's important not to close the doors to the future for this nation while we do it. I really think that research has been that the element that has brought us here this far. It's going to be research and innovation that carries us forward. We cannot close the door on research while we talk about cleaning up waste, and we're only asking for a third of that money. So I want to make another appeal that we not close the door on the future of our nation by shutting down our research. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from California.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my colleagues in this great House, my name is Chuck Fleischman. I represent the 3rd District of Tennessee, which has a great city. That city is Oak Ridge, the birthplace of the Manhattan Project. My colleagues, Oak Ridge has a great history. We won the Cold War there. We won World War II there. But this was a time that the federal government in the manufacturing of nuclear weapons was not as careful as it could have been. We didn't know. We had to win those wars, and we did. But as a result of that legacy, we have a problem. Doc Hastings, my colleague from Washington, talked about the problem in Hanford, but there's 500 square miles in Hanford. That needs to be cleaned up. But in my community in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, there are populations, churches, schools, people all around in a highly condensed area. We have across the DOE complex there a tremendous legacy that needs to be cleaned up, and I want to talk about that briefly. We've got nuclear waste that needs to be cleaned up across the complex. That's being done. But we also have a mercury problem. There is estimated 2 million pounds of mercury in the soil and in the water. This is a real problem for real citizens, for Americans. This is a federal obligation to clean this legacy up. There's no question about that. Across this great nation, whether it's in Oak Ridge, Savannah River, Hanford, Idaho, we have an obligation to the American people to clean this up. We won World War II, we won the Cold War, but we must do this. These wastes are dangerous. It's expensive to clean these things up. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And the longer we take to do this, we expose the people in these communities all across America to the hazards of this nuclear waste. So, Mr. Chairman, as an advocate for Oak Ridge, as an advocate for environmental cleanup, we must get this done. We have decades worth of work to go. We have got to do this. As we honor Oak Ridge and other communities with a great national park which is coming forward, which was voted for in this great House, we can never forget the legacy that's left behind. Environmental cleanup is a must. It is a federal obligation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments of my friends from Tennessee and Washington. Colorado, my district, we have 2 of those plants, World War II and Cold War legacy plants, Rocky Flats, Rocky Mountain Arsenal. So I appreciate the comments and the need to clean these sites up. It's long overdue. I agree with you and look forward to that. But the problem we have here are substantial cuts to the Energy Department budget on the one hand, and on the other hand, an increase to this line item above and beyond the President's request. And as I understand it, there was a request of some the committee recommends to the House $345 million, which is $23.5 million over the administration's request. So although I agree completely with the need to clean up, you all are, the majority party is requesting more than is needed at this point, and it is to the detriment of the rest of the budget of the Energy Department, particularly ones that I'm concerned about, renewable energy such as the National Renewable Energy Lab. And I will have an amendment to that point coming up later. So to my friends, I agree with you. The cleanup needs to go forward. It should be done at the full amount the President requested and not at the $23 million more than has been suggested by the committee. And with that, I yield back.
Lady from Ohio.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
The young lady is recognized for 5 minutes.
This debate is a perfect example of why this bill's funding is so inadequate. What is really being debated is whether we are going to trade off the science of the future, which is so essential to America's competitiveness in the global economy, to take care of necessary past cleanup. Who can make that choice? They are both essential. Are we going to sacrifice the future for the past? That's really what this debate is about. And we know that this bill is $4 billion under the administration's request and over $2 billion under what we spent in this fiscal year of 2013. So we really have an argument that nobody wins. If we fund the past cleanup, we sacrifice the future. If we sacrifice the future, do we really take care of all the past cleanup? We hardly do what's necessary, even with current funding. And so I think it's a perfect example of where the sequestration process is so counterproductive and moves America backwards. We have very imperfect choices here, and actually very dangerous choices that we are being forced to make. I think the majority would be much better suited to come back to us with a budget that allows us to do the job that the Energy and Water Subcommittee is charged with doing. We simply can't try to solve the problem internal to the resources we've been given. It's an impossibility. And so somebody's going to lose. And I guarantee you in the past amendment that just came up, some of the people that were the losers have no lobbies here in Washington. The poorest people in our country who are getting weatherization assistance in order to stay a little bit warmer in the wintertime, they just lost money. They got no lobby here. They got none of those people from these various nuclear sites to come in here and lobby for them, and yet they just lost out in a prior amendment. They have a right to an existence in this country, but we're seeing inside the strictures of this set of choices that we've been given that somebody's always a loser, and actually the country's a loser, because of sequestration and the fact that our subcommittee has been given a mark so far below what is reasonable and, frankly, what we could do if we had a budget that allowed us to move the country forward rather than creating a can't-do nation. We can't do science. We can't do cleanup because of what we were handed by what, a budget committee whose members don't even appear on the floor to argue their positions during this debate. I feel sorry for our country, and I feel sorry for those that have to come down here and take from one another during this debate and hurt people across this country because our allocation is simply too insufficient to meet the needs of the nation. So I want to thank the gentlelady for rising on this very important point of science of the future versus cleanup of the past, but we simply don't have the funds in this bill to do both, and it puts us in a very, very destructive position for the interests of our nation. I yield back my remaining time.
The gentlelady from Ohio yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
An amendment at the desk.
Clerk, designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Takano of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to offer an amendment to the fiscal year 2014 Energy and Water Appropriations Bill to increase funding for the Department of Energy's Advanced Manufacturing Program. My amendment increases funding for the Renewable Energy Reliability and Efficiency Account by $245 million to meet the President's budget request for advanced manufacturing. If we are to remain competitive in the global marketplace, we must fully invest in, develop, and commercialize the emerging technologies that will create high-quality manufacturing jobs in the United States. These investments are crucial to accelerate the advancement of ideas and allow American manufacturers to continue to innovate and compete. By matching the President's request, the Department of Energy will be able will be able to move forward with plans to develop interagency manufacturing innovation institutes that will develop best practices and help manufacturers meet common challenges. These institutes will enable innovation, create a dependable talent pipeline, and improve the overall business climate. It requires a diverse array of partners if advanced manufacturing is to accelerate and thrive in the United States. A federal commitment to these emerging and efficient technologies is the catalyst that will help bring educators, workers, and businesses, as well as local and state partners, to the table. Federal investments in advanced manufacturing will help create more jobs, increase our competitiveness, and allow the United States to continue to be a leader in advancing energy-efficient technologies. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve his time. Does the gentleman yield back?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields back his time. Who seeks recognition?
I seek a recognition in opposition.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to oppose the gentleman's amendment, and I understand he may be offering some other amendments similarly related later on the floor. And suffice to say that my remarks here will also pertain to those amendments. This amendment would unacceptably strike funding for the National Nuclear Security Administration's weapon activity by $245 million in order to increase funding for renewable energy, energy reliability, and efficiency activities. Assuring funding to maintain our nuclear stockpile is our highest priority in our energy and water development bill. Historically, it always has been and will continue to be. We have put off for too long the investments that are needed to ensure that we maintain our nuclear weapons stockpile into the future. Because of this historical underfunding, there's been strong bipartisan support for increasing funding for weapons activities. Our bill takes a responsible approach to meeting those needs, reducing funding $193 million below the request for non-essential activities within the weapons activities account that are not required to maintain the nuclear weapons stockpile. But there are no further savings available. A reduction of this magnitude would severely impact the National Nuclear Security Administration's ability to ensure the continued reliability of our weapons, something which the Secretary of Energy has to do to our Commander-in-Chief each and every year. I support the programs championed by my colleague. That's why we worked hard to increase the advanced manufacturing program by $5 million over fiscal year 2013 within an account that is cut by $971 million. I oppose the amendment and urge members to do likewise. Yield back the balance.
Gentleman yields back his time. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes.
Let me say to the gentleman from California that I am sympathetic toward his efforts on the renewable energy activities at the Department of Energy, as they are critical for America's energy future. And I'm torn as I listen to his arguments, and I just wanted to demonstrate a chart here that shows the relative superiority of the United States in the nuclear weapons field, the largest total inventory in the world, with Russia right behind. We have a significant nuclear capacity, much greater than nations that follow: France, China, the United Kingdom, Pakistan, India, North Korea. The United States has quite significant nuclear complexes, and we must maintain them, and we must provide security for them. I think that the President's negotiations with Russia provide us with a very important opportunity to cut these systems, and to do so in a responsible way that continues our superiority and our security while bringing down the possibilities of reducing these weapons globally. The gentleman's amendment would actually move funds, $335 million, from our weapons accounts and move them to energy efficiency and renewable energy, which is a move that I would like to support at a future date. The sooner the better. And I appreciate him offering the amendment. And though I agree with his intent, as I've said many times before, the allocation for this bill is simply insufficient, and we're robbing one account to try to put funds in another account. I must reluctantly, very reluctantly, oppose the gentleman's amendment, but I think he's moving in the right direction, and I think that this helps our nation move in a more constructive direction for the future. We have a responsibility on the nuclear security front, and hopefully with the ongoing negotiations we'll be able to make this move in the very near future. So I want to thank him for his leadership in moving the country forward and showing us a new path, and let's hope that with the administration's engagement that we can move to that path sooner rather than later. I yield back my remaining time.
The gentlelady from Ohio yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Alabama seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The NNSA Weapons Activities Program is the core of the U.S. nuclear modernization efforts. Reductions of this magnitude, the $245 million being proposed in this amendment, will endanger the nuclear deterrent by delaying or canceling key warhead life extension programs and facility modernization programs. These cuts will also cost taxpayers more in the future because the modernization programs that the Obama administration has requested must be done and will only get more expensive with time. President Obama committed to request robust funding for nuclear modernization to win Senate ratification of his New START treaty program. But unfortunately, to date, he's $1.6 billion behind in that commitment for FY12 through FY14. Without these robust funding levels, our ability to safely reduce the New START levels is in question. The President's 210 Nuclear Posture Review says, quote, "These investments are essential to facilitating reductions while sustaining deterrence under the New START and beyond," close quote. With this tight budget, we must provide every dollar we can to nuclear modernization, to efforts and prevention of the draconian further reductions required by this amendment. NNSA is the only national security spending in this bill. Taking money from NNSA to pay for renewable energy directly undermines our national security to subsidize energy technologies and can't stand on their own in the market. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Alabama yields back. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. Does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I've got an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Amendment offered by Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania, page 22, line 8, after the dollar amount, insert increase by $31 million. Page 28, line 10, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $31 million.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we've had a continuing debate about American energy independence. One way for America to achieve real energy independence is to utilize our own renewable and clean energy resources. Currently, there are over 800 dams across the nation waiting to generate power. The dams are already sitting there. They're sitting on our nation's rivers all across the country, waiting to generate power, just waiting. Now, from Sacramento to Savannah, and right on the Susquehanna River where I live, the power and the consistency of the water flow on these rivers is truly impressive and, as I said, consistent. The energy created from this immense water flow is something that America should harness for the use of individual and commercial power. In that vein, this amendment would increase the water power energy program to $31 million, or by $31 million. Again, this applies only to the water power energy program. Now, the Water Power Program is a vitally important program to reducing our dependence on Middle Eastern oil or fossil fuels for many of folks on the other side of the aisle and the administration who seem desperately opposed to it. It will allow us to become a more energy independent nation and do so in an environmentally sound manner. I mean, while you sleep, while you work, while you drive, while you talk to your family and watch TV, the rivers are flowing. The tides are moving in and out. Power can be generated without any more than that. I mean, it doesn't take us digging anything up, dumping anything in, dredging anything up. It just happens. The Water Power Program is designed to develop water technologies and address barriers to hydropower. Barriers like the permitting process that we currently undergo in this nation, which takes companies that want to do this 10 years, minimum, 10 to 15 years to receive a permit. Who invests in something that takes that long, that kind of money? The problem is that increasingly no one does, and so what's right under our feet, what's going right past us in our homes, in our towns, our rivers, is not being utilized, and it's right there. 800 dams currently in this nation could be generating power at this moment. Hydropower is available in every region of the country and is America's largest source of clean, renewable electricity. It accounts for 67% of domestic renewable generation and 7% of total electricity generation. And it creates good-paying jobs. I mean, from the bottom to the top, every place on the spectrum of job creation, hydropower creates work for people. It's reliable, proven, and domestic technology that can expand in environmentally responsible ways. It can be put to work in rivers, harbors, and coastal areas to capture energy from currents and tides. Harnessing this energy will create a truly renewable and green source of energy. I'd like to thank the Chair and the committee for the work they've done to bring this bill to the floor, and I ask all my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?